Hello there. Welcome to A Moment with Kasisi. And today we will continue looking at the book of John. We're beginning chapter 3. And I wonder whether you have ever attempted to seek your very own voice that is unique and authentic in the midst of many, many other voices that would tell you something different from what you feel inside as the real truth and as the right path. In this broadcast, we will look at a man who is named in the book of John chapter 3 as Nicodemus. And he is a man who seemingly had lost his voice to a group. My name is Kasisi Kĩriakũ wa Kĩnyua, and welcome to this broadcast. In the translation that I have found myself putting in paper from the Greek text of John chapter 3 and verse 1 and 2, I will concentrate on just one line or bit of a line that says, Rabbi, hoidamen hoti apotheo elelusasi didaskalos. And here is my translation in both Gĩkũyũ and English. But I start with English. Now, a man from the Pharisees, or from the Pharisees group, named Nicodemus, but the text here says his name was Nicodemus, a leader of the Judeans. You can say a leading Jew or a member of a Jewish leadership. And my Gĩkũyũ translation there is narere. Mũndũrũme wa gĩkundi kĩa Afarisayo wetagwo Nicodemus mũnene wa Ayudea. I continue resisting, the temptation of translating that as Ayahudi. And line 2 says, he came to him at night and said to him, Rabbi, we know you are a teacher who has come from God, for no one is able to do the signs that you do unless God is with you. Agĩũka kũrĩ we ũtukũ kana ihinda rĩa nduma akĩmwĩra, Rabi, nĩtũĩ wĩ mũrutani kuma kwĩ Ngai, tondũ gũtirĩ ũngĩhota gwĩka mawĩko ta maya ũreka tiga Ngai akorirwo hamwe nawe na hamwe nake. I hope that in the last or several broadcasts that you have worked with me, you have begun to understand what I've been trying to put across. That when you look at the gospel narratives, you don't go seeking history, because the intention of the writers was not history. The intention of the writers are specific understanding of who Jesus is or was to them. In John, you will have noticed that John begins to tell you a story about, or an event about Jesus. And he gives you a short description of an event, and then he moves on to something else. Close to how we tell short stories, but with a bigger picture in mind. Not expecting you to seek out inner details of the story, but something that speaks to something very specific that will lead you to the larger understanding of the text. So, as we have learned so far, and as it is my motto as Kasisi, we seek wisdom together so that we can gain understanding. And today's wisdom that we want to seek is finding that authentic voice that is in you, that sometimes is either silenced or covered up. We have learned, or we are told in that text that I've just read, that there is this man called Nicodemus. And we are told that he was from the Pharisees. And you have to work at the translation. You have to work around the translation to make sense of it, because it says from the Pharisees. But here we know that it's a man who came from a group of the Pharisees. And sometimes we may wonder, who were these? Because we meet them in Matthew, we meet them in Mark, in Luke, and in John. And they are depicted differently in all of these texts. Particularly Matthew is very brutal when he talks about the Pharisees. And I think the image that we have a lot about the Pharisees, even when we talk about the spirit of the Pharisees, is what that is depicted or that is revealed in the book of Matthew. But at the time Jesus came into the world, the Pharisees had become a very strong group. It was one among many other Jewish groups that had developed in the attempt to identify or to make an identity of themselves. And they struggled with the understanding of Jewish group as a kingdom of priests, a holy nation called by God. And they always wrestled with that and was asking, who is this? How should we be living as this chosen kingdom, as a people of God, as a priesthood, a royal priesthood? Some, like the Zealots, would say, hey, let us take up our guns. If it were today's, in our movement, they would say, let us take up our guns. But of course, they were taking swords to go and fight it and kill to get the kingdom. Others, another group of the so-called the Sadducees, they said, let's spend more time reading the Torah and trying to understand what we can gain from the Torah. There was also another group that said, no. They were called the Essenes. They would say, let us separate ourselves. We do not need to mix ourselves with anybody. Let us move out of the city, move out of these groups and go live into those other places. And definitely there was also the crowd of many other people who refused to identify themselves with any of these groups. But one of the most important of these groups was the Pharisees, which was very strong, mainly Judean and mainly middle class, as we would say. They were wealthy men and women, possibly, who refused to engage in politics. They were what we call apolitical. They refused to engage in the Roman dispensation, political dispensation that was happening at the time, but instead spent a lot of time studying and living the word that they were reading, the Torah. And because of their piety, they were deeply, deeply respected. It was a deeply respected group. And we see Nicodemus coming out of that group. But we are told he was a leader of the Judeans. So we expect him to be among the top of the leadership of the group. And if you read, I believe it is Exodus 24, you hear the invitation of Moses and Aaron and his sons to go up the mountain, and Moses is reminded to also bring with him a group of 70 elders. A tradition would develop within the Jewish leadership that speaks specifically to a group of leaders who would form what would later become the Sanhedrin in this case. And as they engage themselves in leadership, some of them would be very respected, and majority, of course, all of them would be respected. But what is interesting for me today is why John specifically tells us that Nicodemus was one of the Pharisees. This group was quite cohesive, was united. They worked together. They lived under what is today would call collective responsibility. And therefore, meaning that you can not go outside the group thinking and the group interpretation and the group understanding. But when we look at Nicodemus, we realize that something was bothering him. There is something that was hindering him from listening to the authentic Nicodemus. And this, of course, was his, being in that group mentality. And groups and individuals sometimes can be very hegemonic. By this I mean, they want you to follow, to stay within the lines, to stay within boundaries. You cannot go beyond these boundaries. And as we always say, we live in a very scripted society. Some of us, if you want to understand what beauty is, there is a script of beauty. If you want to understand who a Christian is, there is a script. And even some will go further and say, hey, we are not that kind of Christians. We are conservative. Or, no, we are liberal. Or, no, we are centrist. All these are labels that we put upon ourselves as boundaries, as scripts. And sometimes these boundaries and this group thinking, this so-called collective responsibility mentality, it suffocates authenticity and creativity. So that when you want to break out, you are always silenced and reminded, you know who you are. You wear in a certain way. You speak in a certain way. You eat in a certain manner. You drive certain cars. You live in a certain neighborhood. You don't mingle with so-and-so. And when you attempt to break out, some will even try to silence you. We know there are so many men and women, even within our communities that we know, that have tried to break out of the mentality. And then the voices that are outside are stronger. My call today, as we seek our authentic voice, is to break out. To break out from the group thinking. To break out from the so-called collective responsibility. To break out from the so-called script, and where you begin to find your authentic self. Some people would say, hey, think about outside the box. But I say, get out of the box. You don't have to be in the box to think outside of it. Get out of it if you want your freedom, your thoughts, your way of interacting with life and finding that very voice. When you break out, the bigger question is, where do you go to? Whom do you listen to now that you're no longer listening to the group mentality? And sometimes we tend to go back to ourselves. We become lost in that prideful thinking that we are better loved than so-and-so. I'm out of that group now. I am free. I can do whatever I want in life. And we know that there are so many people today who don't even take a moment to listen to themselves, even as they're speaking. I don't know whether you have met those kind of people who will speak for hours and hours talking about themselves, not giving you a chance even to respond to their talk. These are some of the people who are lost in themselves. They attempt to break out of the group to find this authentic voice, but when they start finding that authentic voice, they become prideful. They say, you know what the heck, I don't need you. I'm better than you. I do things, it is none like any other, like me in our midst. But when we look at Nicodemus, he did at last break out of the group mentality. He had a choice. He had a choice to go to the power that be, the military might, because he was a man of might, we are told. He could have gone to the intellectuals of his day. He could have gone to the wealthy. who sometimes are very powerful. And we know that. Those who are living in the United States know that one of the reasons sometimes we elect certain leaders is because of the might and wealth that they bring into the equation. And some will wield that wealth for the sake of power. So Nicodemus would have literally sought to break out of the box and go to the powerful. But instead, he decides that I need to go somewhere else. I have heard somebody else speak. I have seen him do some signs or reveal certain signs. And I think there is something in him. Where do you go when you break out? You don't go to yourself. You will have to begin to learn to surround yourself with people who can empower that authentic voice in you. Somebody who can call you out. Somebody who can tell you, you know what? The kind of life you're living is fake. But when I listen to you, I see the authentic you. And by the end of this broadcast, I'm going to give you an example of myself and how I was challenged by somebody who thought that I was too much of a fake and I needed to break out of the box, outside of the box. So Nicodemus, there are several things that we learn from Nicodemus. First of all, he discovered very quickly that group mentality robs you your dignity as a human being. It denies you the freedom to think, the freedom to act from the point of knowledge, but rather it kind of boxes you into this group mentality. And he knew that he needed to go to a place where the authentic self would be empowered. And you know what? He had a tradition already that they had learned through the great one of all, and that is Moses. Moses, they never called Moses a prophet. They never called Moses sometimes we say that he is a lawgiver. But among the Jews, he was the greatest teachers. He was the greatest teacher of all time. And they had developed within the Jewish community a class of people who believed in empowering others, speaking into their authentic selves. And these were called rabbi, my teacher. Rabbi means my teacher, where you own the one who speaks to you wisdom and you allow him to speak to you directly and to challenge you. You know, most of us don't want to be challenged. In fact, when you're challenged by the very best, we tend to hide or we tend to become defensive as we may. But he found a teacher and he went to this teacher. And in fact, he addresses him and he says, Rabbi. And he recognizes something else from this teacher. When you surround yourself with the right people, you recognize the gifts they have. He recognized that whatever this man was doing was more than what other rabbis were doing. And he says, we know you come from God because you are a teacher from God. Because the things that you're doing, nobody else can do them unless he is sent or God is with him. He recognizes something more powerful, something more truthful, something authentic in the man. And I think this is why he's going at night. We may say, for example, I've heard many people preach about, going at night because he feared the crowd. And that is possible. But I think he needed to come to Jesus where he could hear the authentic voice that he was seeking. Tonight and this morning, I am inviting you, my brother, my sister, to find your rabbi, my teacher, one who can mentor you, one who can reveal the truth to you, one who will challenge the depth of your authenticity and will see the fakeness in you and will tell you, well, you may be following the crowd here, or you may be following a script that is given to you. And most of us are unable to move on because of continuously following this script. And he found his help. And we shall be seeing in line 3 and line 4 and so forth, Nicodemus being challenged by my teacher, a rabbi, who is going to speak so powerfully and challenge him to move out of the box that he can find his voice. And Nicodemus reminds me of one of my teachers at Emory University in Georgia. I remember writing a paper, and the paper that I was writing was on Rwanda genocide. It was an ethic paper, and I was trying to compare the killing that happened in the so-called Manchurian War in China and Japan, those places. And I was looking at what one of the ethicists, one of the greatest ethicists of the time, an American ethicist by the name Reinhard Niebuhr, and his brother Richard Niebuhr. And so I was using Niebuhr and his brother as a voice to speak into Rwanda genocide. And so I wrote this 29-page paper that I presented proudly to my professor. And I remember sitting in her office, and she told me, Johnson, you're a great writer, and you have a strong, authentic voice. But what I'm reading in this paper is the authentic voice is about 2%. Everything else is parroted. You're just parroting what Niebuhr said, what Richard, his brother, said, and what other people are saying. But there is an authentic voice in you. So I'm not going to grade this paper. Go back, rewrite this paper, and I want you to listen to yourself as you write this paper and write that which is authentically you. And let me tell you, I learned a great lesson. A lesson of not being a copycat. A lesson of thinking beyond that which is given to me. A lesson to see beyond the group, to see beyond the one who thinks, to challenge even some of the knowledge that we are given. And I continue finding my freedom. And I speak from a space of freedom, a place of authenticity. I cannot declare that I have found fully my authentic voice, but every day I step towards getting that authentic voice. Nicodemus was at the right time. He came to the right rabbi, my teacher, and he was poised for greatness, as we shall see. And if you stay with me, even later in the chapters, we shall see the space of this man called Nicodemus. What a voice. What a challenge. Who are you? What is your authentic voice? Who is authentic you? Are you a mere follower? Are you a mere parrot, parroting things that others are saying? Do you copy other people's sermons? Do you copy other people's way of living? Are you just a follower of a crowd with collective responsibility? Or can you break out of the box and find your authentic voice? Nicodemus chose, though at night, to listen to the authentic voice. And when he followed it, he found his teacher. He found wisdom. And when he found wisdom, we will see later, he gained understanding. I thank you so much for being with me this hour of the evening and this hour of the morning in Kenya. And I hope that you have learned one or two things in this lesson of finding the authentic self. I invite you to continue listening, following me, and like, comment, engage, and even follow my YouTube channel, where you can find more of the teachings and many more if you miss any. In the meantime, may the Lord bless you as you seek to find your authentic self. Blessing to you. Amen.